You've got to be resourceful. You've got to be a little independent. And I guess, for lack of a better word, a little bit tough as far as the climate goes and everything. Friendships I made and the personal and professional experiences I had were just incredible. So,
are you an RV person, or are you just RV life curious, wondering how people live in a tiny space with their family 24/7? Either way, this is a podcast for you. My name is Kate White, and I travel full-time with my family and 2 kids and the dog in an RV. Every week, I sit down either with a fellow RV woman to discuss why she chose RV life and how she has changed on the road, or with a special guest who speaks on a topic relevant to travel life. Pull a chair up to the fire and let's chat. Kim Ryals, welcome to the RV Queens podcast. How are you today?
Hey, Kate, I'm doing really well. How are you doing?
I'm great. You're not in Alaska right now, are you?
No, I'm not. I'm on the Olympic Peninsula of Washington at the moment. And although I've been dealing with some really soggy cold weather lately, right at when the time changed, we seem to be full on in spring, and it is gorgeous outside.
Oh, I love that. We're planning to head that way this summer/fall, and I cannot wait. I've never been to the Pacific Northwest before, so I'm excited.
You are in for a real treat. It is spectacular.
I've heard. Okay, so Kim, you moved to Alaska about 10 years ago for a job. Tell me, where did you live before you took the job? What drew you to want to live in a bush community that's only accessible by plane or boat?
In my professional career, I've lived in a number of states across the U.S. My background is in fish and wildlife. And my different positions have taken me all over the country. But being connected to the outdoors and natural resources, Alaska has always been high on my list for a place to visit. And I also thought about moving there one day. So when a position came up to be in charge of the Copper River salmon brand in Cordova, Alaska, I applied for it, got the job, and moved up over a decade ago. My background, both personal and professional, had kind of prepared me for living in a place that's pretty remote and rural. However, I will say that your first living experience in Alaska, as you said, not accessible by road, was quite, that was 100% Alaskan experience, and it was amazing. So, yeah, I lived there full time out of Cordova. And like I said, worked for the fishing fleet, the Copper River salmon fishing fleet. At some point, I decided to come what we call on or off the road system. The town of Cordova has 18 miles of road in it total. So at some point, not all jobs last forever. I decided to take a position after my time in Cordova on the road system in Palmer, Alaska. And there I was the first executive director for the Mat-Su Trails and Parks Foundation, connecting and improving trails in the Mat-Su Borough, which is an area about 25,000 square miles large, north of Anchorage. Between those two positions in Alaska and living there full time, I've experienced Alaska in so many ways that a lot of people don't get to see. So really, it's been amazing.
I have so much respect for you, right off the top, because I feel like that would be so challenging to just dive in deep like that. Okay, I'm going to get some obvious questions out of the way off the bat. First of all, what's it like to live in such a remote area? And did you have culture shock when you first got there?
It's very different. I say that Alaska is probably the most unique culture you can visit without a passport, in the United States. It's far away. It's so big and so sparsely populated. It's hard to wrap your mind around it. If you put the state of Alaska, transposed it on a map of the entire lower 48 states, from one tail end to the other, kind of would overlap all of the lower 48 states. So it's huge. Not every part is accessible by road, only, mostly south central. So there's a lot of alternative ways of getting around. Obviously, boat, plane, in the winter, snow machine, mushing with dogs and whatnot. So I was prepared for it to be much different than any of the other places I've lived all around the country. But there definitely was like a 6 month to 1 year period that it was, getting acclimated to the differences. Now, Cordova being off the road system and tucked up against the side of a mountain in the Prince William Sound is incredibly safe as far as socially goes, people and everything. You're expected to leave your car keys in the ignition when you park and go places, especially in the winter, for example, so that if someone needed to move your car out of the way in this tiny community, they could do it. So it's super safe. We're still on landlines in Cordova. Obviously, we have cell phone and Wi-Fi and whatnot, but to get Wi-Fi in your home, you would have to have kind of this cable connection. To have the cable connection, you'd have to have a landline. And because the area code and the first 3 digits are the same, everyone's landline, you would know somebody. If I was going to call you or you were going to call me, for instance, I was number 3459. Just the last 4 digits of the phone. So you've got to be resourceful. You've got to be a little independent. And I guess, for lack of a better word, a little bit tough as far as the climate goes and everything. The friendships I made and the personal and professional experiences I had were just incredible. So I've enjoyed living full time in Alaska. I think I've already told you that I have I've come outside since, and I'm spending a lot of the winter down in the lower 48, but I'm going back to Alaska every summer because I at some point I decided it's not the cold that was it for me. The reason that I wanted to come out, I have a elderly father in Florida. He's getting to be upwards of 90, so I want to be available for him a little bit more. And it's more the dark. Where I was living in Alaska in the winter, the sun would rise at 10:30 in the morning and set at 3, which isn't as bad as further up north in Alaska. But one thing I did discover during my time there is I'm definitely solar powered. I work and I play when the sun's out. And that can be a problem in both directions because in the winter I kind of wasn't in the mood to do too much of anything. And then in the summer, it's the opposite problem. I'm ready to do everything 24/7. So it's a lot to get used to.
Yeah, that's so fascinating because I can imagine I'd be the same way. I feel that way living in the lower 48. When it's the winter months and then, the sun goes down early, I'm like, I'm ready to hermit it up, people. So if it was dark for that many hours, man, I think I would go a little crazy too. So at what point did you decide to come out, as you said, in the winter and head south? How many years had you lived there before you started having kind of this annual, up there during the warm months and then down south to see your father?
Yeah, so year round, I've spent 5 years in Alaska. Not a long time, but I've been going up there now for the summer ever since. Along the lines of not wanting to lose my connection to Alaska, I started a summer business up there, a summer tourism business. So I drive up and back now each year to run my business. So it's been a few years. It's been a real journey with I've been listening to your podcast lately since you and I connected, and I know everybody's got a unique story about how they ended up being an RV queen. When you move up to Alaska, a lot of people do it this way. You don't want to spend a lot of money moving your possessions unless they're very valuable. In other words, I didn't want to spend $10,000 moving $3,000 worth of stuff. So one of the best ways to move in and out of Alaska is with nothing, with just what your car will hold. So when I started to come out during the winter, I didn't have anything. I gave up my rental in Alaska, and I came down to the lower 48 with just what would pack in my vehicle. About that time, I decided that I wanted to go out on my own and start a couple of businesses. And the 2 businesses that I started in 2019, the first one was a being a consultant for nonprofit organizations. And then the second one was my summer tourism business. Now, 2019 figures significantly in this story because both of the businesses revolved around people meeting face-to-face in groups. My timing was just extraordinarily wonderful. So I had to take a little bit of time out in opening and starting and running my businesses. I had wanted to live on the Oregon coast for a long time. And here comes our global health crisis. And I took that opportunity to buy a 28-foot single wide travel trailer. It was 20 years old. I parked it at a friend's driveway. And my pandemic project was ripping out the ugly parts in the inside, taking down the drapes, the valances, the gold chandeliers, all the things that you would find with a 1970 or 1980 something travel trailer. I updated the inside to be cute in a maritime theme, which is hilarious because I had never picked up a paintbrush or a drill in my life. And I made it comfortable and cute. I think I spent $5,500 on the trailer. It was in good shape. It was just old. I spent another couple of $1,000 updating the inside, and then I pulled it to the southern Oregon coast, which I'd had my eye on for a long time. This was my plan to. I'm a single woman, no kids, just dogs. This was my plan to isolate in a place that I'd wanted to visit more. And I happened to be down in the lower 48 when the pandemic hit. So I spent about a year out on the Oregon coast in my cute little trailer. I'd found an 8-spot RV park that was half a mile from the beach. And it was down 2 dead-end dirt roads. It was only $400 a month, including all the things that you would normally get in a permanent park, the water, sewer, garbage, cable, Wi-Fi, that kind of thing. So it was living super cheap and super resourcefully. Again, my businesses they were not operable at the time. So I just parked it on the Oregon coast in my little updated trailer. When things started to reopen again and I could do my businesses, do my consulting in person and run my Alaska tourism business, I ended up selling the trailer that I'd bought and updated. I had invested in a 11-foot teardrop trailer, tiny little teardrop camper to pull around, and I hopped in that, and I went up once again to Alaska for the summer. I have some unique ways that I'm doing this 100% mobile life that I'm living. But I took the teardrop trailer back up to Alaska, ran my first real season with my tourism business, and then I just continued not to rent or lease a home again. So I am operating, it's me and one dog now. I am living my life in a van that's pulling an 11-foot teardrop trailer. The only thing it has inside is a queen-size bed. The back hatch opens up with a kitchen back there. It works out really well for what I'm doing in Alaska's summertime. And then in the rest of the time, when I'm coming out, I have the freedom to visit friends, go see my dad and check in with him. I fill in some of the gaps with a little bit of dog sitting around the country with trusted house sitters, which is if your community hasn't hooked up or dove into trusted house sitters, it's a really cool service, matching pet sitters with people who want to travel. So between the van, the teardrop trailer, visiting friends in my family, doing taking care of people's homes and pets, and then some travel renting Airbnbs by the month in British Columbia, I just kind of feel like I'm surfing life and living very spontaneously. I have a penchant for weather that's not over 70 degrees, so I kind of land in the places that I want to be in, following the changes in weather around the country. And this may not be something I do forever, but it's working really well right now.
What an incredible life you have built for yourself. That is so amazing.
Thank you.
Okay, so
it's been very organic, and it wasn't planned. I'm a good planner, and I like having a calendar in place for the things, the way where I'm gonna be and what I'm gonna be doing. A lot of people are living to work, and I'm lining up the businesses that I created to support the life that I want to live. And it's very flexible. It's very mobile. Yeah, and everybody, I think, in your community also will know that I say things like 80 to 90% of the time it's beautiful, and 10 to 20% of the time it can be absolute chaos. But I still think that's a good ratio for no matter what life you're living,
Aligning your life and your work and just making it work together, I think is every woman that's listening to this podcast and participating in the call is, I would say, trying to reach that as well. So I love that approach so much. I do want to get into Alaska specifics, because I have to admit, I don't know very much about Alaska beyond what I happen to just teach my kids in a homeschool lesson, actually. What I can tell is that it's extremely beautiful, but it can also be really challenging, terrain-wise. And you kind of mentioned that a little bit ago. So what do you wish people knew about Alaska?
To get your head wrapped around how sparsely populated Alaska is, it has about 700 or 750,000 residents spread out over a place that is as big as 3 Texases. You don't have the type of choices in Alaska that you have everywhere else. It is beautiful, and that's what most people are up there. People are up in Alaska not because they want to be around a lot of other people. They are up in Alaska because they enjoy the beauty and the rugged outdoors. The trade-offs, though, when I say not a lot of choices, especially when you're living in a place like Cordova, there's 2 or 3 stores in Cordova, and you do not have, for instance, 2 aisles of hair products. There are not 4 aisles of dog food. You feel very fortunate to have 1 or 2 choices of any of the things that you need, and you feel grateful that they're on the shelf. They're more expensive than what people are used to in the lower 48. Your emergency services are not as robust as in the lower 48. And sometimes they can become overwhelmed with urgent situations that may or may not be associated with weather. So the people who live in Alaska are typically I keep mentioning resourceful. They're fun. There's grit to getting along in Alaska. You need to travel and live your life prepared for all sorts of calamities that don't seem to happen in other places. I think the planning for things, people aren't super attached to their day planners because Alaska can throw you curveballs. So there's a lot of trade-offs. There's a lot of personal space. There's feelings of independence and freedom, beauty that is just beyond imaginable at every turn, especially in South Central Alaska. So you constantly feel like you're moving around and living in a national park, like in the West or something here in the lower 48. So you've got freedom to roam and play and space. I take myself and my dogs out on trails a lot in the mountains, and so it's easy to get out away from Anchorage is the only city, but Alaska has a number of small towns. It's easy to get out and away from everybody and have magnificent places to yourself. So if you enjoy that type of thing, Alaska should definitely be on your radar screen, if at least just to visit. But again, the price tag comes with less choices, more expense, and just knowing that you're kind of prepared for any of the types of things. So I say curveballs, the road system isn't that robust. So an accident on the road system can tie you up for hours. There's earthquakes. Alaska is part of the Pacific Rim of Fire. So it is constantly bubbling along underneath the ground. I've been through, I think, 3 or 4 different earthquakes in my time in Alaska. None of the ones that I experienced were too bad. There's mudslides. The winters can be harsh. You've got to be resourceful. You've got to be prepared. I personally like the aspect of not a whole bunch of choices. We joke around that if there's only two selections of dog food in the store, you haven't spent that half an hour looking for dog food, so then you actually have enough time to take your dog out and play with them. So it's a really mixed bag, and it's not particularly an easy lifestyle, but it's rewarding in so many ways.
Sounds incredible. So why is it important for RVers to caravan up to Alaska rather than going on their own?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I have driven up to Alaska and back. I'm now getting to the point where I'd have to think hard about how many times. The very first time I drove up to Alaska was to take that job over a decade ago, and driving through a foreign country to start with, and also knowing that it's going to be super remote the more north you get. I recruited my little big brother to go with me. He's 6'4" and a boat captain and mechanic, so he's super handy to have along. Yeah, I think for me and for him too, and he's well traveled, it was the unknown about getting into places that were so remote. So he accompanied me on my first drive up to Alaska. But since then, I've done it over a dozen times. Certainly, if you count both ways, dozens of times. And at first, I set out having partners to drive with just because it's so long. The services are spread out so far that you have to, for instance, if your gas tank hits half a tank, you've got to look at that as empty and make sure that you pull over and top it off, because you can have 200 or 300 miles at least between some services. If you were to have any type of mishap, like mechanical problems or something, having someone with you who could bring you to a place where you might be able to get some help would be important. So traveling in numbers is kind of a safety thing in Alaska. The people are up to Alaska. The people of Canada are wonderful, very friendly. I've never felt unsafe driving up there in stretches of places that you can be on a quote highway for hours sometimes without seeing another car, and also without seeing a gas station. So either having someone with you or having the confidence in both your rig and yourself in case anything unexpected happened it's key. I've gotten comfortable enough with the drive, and there's not a lot of choices in doing the drive either. So the good thing is you can't get lost, but now I'm comfortable with the drive, so I feel confident doing it on my own. I noticed in my travels at some point that there are RV caravans out there available for you to join. They're not, a lot of the caravans have 50 to 100 rigs traveling together, which, yeah, they typically are very large rigs, 35, 40-foot diesel pusher motorhomes, often towing a vehicle behind them. Those caravans are very intensive with kind of holding your hand going to Alaska. A lot of them last 30 to 60 days. They have reserved all of the things that you want to do with them, yes, and they provide meals and everything. However, they cost $10,000 and up per person to go on. I happened to notice that there wasn't something available for people like us who might be, pretty comfortable going and operating in their rig and camping out of their rig, say from one state to another. And so I wanted it, all of a sudden occurred to me just a couple of summers ago that I had information and experience that some people might be looking for if they wanted to drive up to Alaska, but did not want to join a 100 rig caravan at $10,000 per person. So that inspired me to open up Caravan to Alaska, and I have a website of the same name, caravantoalaska.com, and offer support, route planning, and just general leadership for a smaller caravan of say 10 to 15 rigs with more independent travelers who only wanted to come together for like 10 days to go up to make the journey up to Alaska, and definitely not charge $10,000 a person for it. Right now, I didn't know if you wanted to talk about this as well, but I've got the registration is up for the 2024 season, and I now have people on a wait list for 2025. My caravan I'm charging people $849 to come with me over 10 days, departing from the lower 48, driving up to Alaska. And basically, we have 3 meetings before the trip begins to introduce ourselves to each other, learn a little bit about how to plan a trip to go to Alaska, get tips and advice on what to pack and ways to make this journey really simple and stress-free. And so so now I have, I guess, 2 businesses that are associated with Alaska. I've got the summer tourism business that's adventure and trails for small, medium groups. And then I also have Caravan to Alaska, which I'm inviting anybody who would like to go with me just to come along. It's aimed for the more, I guess, people with a certain level of experience and a little bit of independence in their RV travels.
Yeah, and that leads into, I was going to ask just logistically how this whole thing works. So I heard you say people sign up on your website. You have about 3 meetings beforehand. I'm guessing they're remote. And then you guys meet up and you kind of have laid out how, is everyone stopping at the same place on the same day? Or what do you mean by independent travelers versus those that need a little bit more handholding? Sure.
So in the bigger RV caravans, the big expensive ones, people who participate in those caravans don't really need to do anything but load their stuff into their RV and show up. I've actually, in my travels, I've met people in the caravans, in those large, expensive, very assistance-packed caravans who, they're paying for the service of not having to do any of the planning of themselves, basically. My ideal partners in this drive up would be the type of person who feels perfectly confident. For instance, say this summer they have a trip planned in their RV where they're going to drive from South Carolina to New Mexico. And they feel confident operating their RV on a cross-country journey. Their rig they feel confident in their rig's integrity and seaworthiness, and they're used to planning some of their own adventures themselves. So what we do in the caravan is, depending on who signs up, I pick what I call a muster point. It's a gathering place. In years past, it's been the state of Washington because most of the participants have been in the Pacific Northwest. So we'll gather at a state park in the state of Washington, just south of the Canadian border, the night before. after we've had these meetings for preparation and info. So we'll gather the night before we cross the Canadian border in the state of Washington. And then the next morning, we'll just set out. We'll all cross the border together. And then we've stuck together for the entire journey up to the final point, which is right outside of Anchorage, Alaska. So we travel together. And with a smaller caravan like this, it's possible and preferred for all the rigs to kind of convoy, keep together in kind of formation. I pick out places for us to land in a scheduled way 3 times along the journey. The first night out is at a campground in British Columbia, whose owners, a wonderful husband and wife team. The husband used to commercial fish. So he has a little halibut and fish and chips food truck on the campground site. I've vetted all the places that I'm staying. It's like I've made friends. I've done it enough. Yeah. I've done it enough that I've actually made friends along the route in the way, places I stop and I see my Canadian friends. So we've got 3 reservations that I make for the entire group. The first night out in Canada, and there's reasons I do that because we're just beginning the journey and I like this campground and it's the right distance from Washington and whatnot. Halfway through the journey up in the Yukon, Whitehorse is the capital of Yukon, and about halfway through your journey, you're probably ready for some laundry, some hot showers, a town where you can have a nice dinner on the Yukon River, all that kind of thing. You've been out riding the range for many days in places that are very remote, so it feels great coming into town. And then the last night before the caravan's over, outside of Anchorage, Palmer, Alaska, is kind of like a little goodbye celebration. And then everybody in the caravan parts ways. And they're there in Alaska with many thousands of other RVers. There's an annual migration basically to Alaska because it's on so many bucket lists of people who recreational RV. So Caravan to Alaska is more than just semantics. I bring people up and they either continue to travel with friends they've made in the caravan, or they might be ready to do some sightseeing and moving around Alaska on their own, in their own rig, just by themselves. But what the caravan does is gives everyone, it's a window into the unknown and gives everyone who are pretty experienced travelers confidence in their abilities to drive from the lower 48 through Canada into Alaska. So then they have a nice summer in Alaska, or 3 weeks, or whatever the amount of time they're spending with someone in the caravan or on their own. And when they're ready to come home, they turn around and depart at, on their time, and pretty much will do the same route south if they've been wanting to land in the Pacific Northwest. So it's what I put the caravan together with what I wish was available when I started driving to Alaska. There was no way that I was going to pay $10,000 to follow another RV up to Alaska. But there also was a barrier, and I felt a little bit intimidated about making a cross-continent drive through a foreign country in remote places. It was just a lot of unknowns to me. Had I had access to something like Caravan to Alaska, I definitely would have signed up, at least for my first drive up there. Having the company, having the support, having someone who knows the routes. The 3 reservations that I make, beginning, middle, and end, are little checkpoints in what's basically become a 10-day cruise. But the other days are spent, I know enough about the routes that when we gauge the mood of the group, and like it's 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, how does everybody feel about knocking off for the day? And then I know the campgrounds that we have choices of in the next 1, 2, or 3 hours, if that makes sense. So I can say, well, we've got a beautiful provincial campground coming up that has a huge lake that's turquoise blue that looks like you're in the Caribbean, and that's 2 hours from now. Or we could stop here 20 minutes up the road, and this campground looks like that. So the days in between the 3 reservations are a little bit more consensus driven and iterative depending on the mood of the group.
That's incredible. Yeah, I loved your description of exactly how it works, because that's what I've been curious about in my mind. And I think you captured it really well. Okay, so before I ask my last couple questions, will you just quickly highlight for us how we can connect with you online?
The Caravan to Alaska, you can find, I hope I did a good job in the FAQs. Everything you'd want to know about how the Caravan operates can be found on the website, caravantoalaska.com. My email is on there, and my phone number as well. So my email is Kim, K-I-M, at caravantoalaska.com. And you can feel free to reach out and connect with me. Go ahead and take a look at the page with the FAQs on it, because there is a lot of information on there. And if you still have questions, please, give me a shout. I've been on a few podcasts lately. Apparently I didn't get all this information put together in time to capture a lot of people's interest in 2024. So I actually have 8 or 10 people who are on a list for 25. They haven't committed yet, but they want kind of first right of refusal when I open up registration for 2025. I have one person on a wait list for 2026. I don't have anyone going with me in 2024. I know it's late breaking notice, but if anyone has some time this summer and they want to drive to Alaska, they're more than welcome to come with me this May.
What date are you leaving?
I am looking at leaving mid-May.
Amazing. And there are a couple women I know that might be interested in that.
My departure date and time and location are often a function of who's going on the Caravan. So if, like last time we did this, I had everyone going from the Pacific Northwest, so Washington made really good sense. So that can change based on interest. But if people are interested in 2024, I have availability. And so take a look at the website and see if it's something they want to do this summer.
That's what I call RV time. It's like, we'll figure it out.
Flexibility is key in these lifestyles for sure.
That's right. So, Kim, you have such a unique life. And I'm curious to hear your take on something. When you think back to Kim before you took that executive director role out in the Bush community and Kim now, what has changed?
I'm getting close to 60 years old. And up until that time I took the position in Alaska, everything about my life looked a lot like most people's lives. I've never been a homeowner, but I have leased nice homes in different places across America. I've always had regular jobs that have been kind of banker's hours and that kind of thing. I think the biggest things that are the difference is now everything is set up so that it's so organic, and I feel like I'm surfing. And when I meet people, at first sometimes I was a little bit hesitant. I'm intentionally unhoused, and sometimes I was a little bit hesitant to just come out and say that with whoever I'd met. But I have found I have never had anyone say anything but wonderfully positive things when I've explained what I'm doing. So I think what's changed is I just feel I feel very free. I'm really enjoying the mobility and the freedom to go where I want, when I want. Definitely enjoying the reduced expenses overall. So yeah, I feel like I'm very adaptable and resourceful, and I'm just kind of riding the wave.
That is wonderful. Okay, last question for you. The slogan for this show is a podcast about unexpected riches. And so I want to hear from you. What is the unexpected richness that you found from your RV life?
I think combining all the things we just talked about, I'd say I just love being the captain of my time. That's where I feel very wealthy. And I think time is the most, it's our most important resource. All we all have is time. So I feel like this lifestyle has given me complete master and female captainness of my own time.
Female captainness. I love it so much. Cool. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today, Kim. I thoroughly enjoyed getting to know you and hearing your story and learning more about Alaska and how to caravan there. Thank you so much for being on.
Thanks, Kate. I really enjoyed it too. And you reach out when you're ready to go to Alaska. I'd love to drive up there with you.
Will do, for sure. All right, I will see you on the road.
Okay.
All right, my friends. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode and for being my favorite part of RV life. If you could please like and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on, that would be awesome. And listen, if you want to have conversations like I had on this episode with your fellow RV women, head to rvqueenspodcast.com/community and choose your RV Queen Circle today. All right, guys, I'll see you next week, or hopefully I will see you on the road. I'm excited.